At my husband's funeral, they called my best friend his true pillar. I'm Ava Hayes, 38, and I was the one who stood invisible in the back while she soaked up the sympathy that was supposed to be mine. They told me Mark's death was a tragic accident, but in my palm, I clutched the silver locket he'd given me 2 days before he crashed. His final words echoed in my mind. It's the key to our future. Now I know his death wasn't an accident, and my best friend was the key to his end. Before I tell you how I unraveled it all, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button, and if you've ever had your world turned upside down by a betrayal, trust me, you will want to hear what happened next. The condo was too quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your eardrums like a scream held back. 2 weeks since Mark's funeral, and I was still drowning in it. Seattle's gray light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning the Puget Sound into a sheet of dull silver. I stood in the middle of our minimalist living room, his choice, not mine, clutching the silver locket he'd given me 2 days before he died. My fingers traced its engraved vines, cold and heavy as a stone in my palm. "Don't open it until our anniversary," he'd said, his green eyes bright with a secret. "It's the key to our future." Now, that future was gone, smashed to pieces on Chuckanut Drive in a car crash they called an accident. I hadn't cried yet. Not at the memorial, not when the police called, not even when I saw the crumpled remains of his Tesla in the news photos. It wasn't strength, it was paralysis. My mind, always so good at cataloging details, cornices, keystones, the worn patina of century-old brick, couldn't process this. Mark, my husband of 8 years, the man who'd built a tech empire while I restored old buildings, was gone and I was alone. The memorial had been a blur of black dresses and whispered condolences, but one moment stood out like a knife. Eleanor Hayes, Mark's mother, had stood at the podium, her silver hair immaculate, her voice dripping with old money poise. "Claire was the daughter I never had," she'd said, her arm around Claire Jensen, Mark's business partner, and my best friend for a decade. She was Mark's true pillar. The room had nodded, teary-eyed, while I stood in the back, invisible. Eleanor's eyes slid over me like I was a smudge on her perfect world. Claire, her perfect blonde hair catching the light, had squeezed my arm, her touch too tight, too constant. "I'm here for you, Ava," she'd whispered, but her eyes were too dry, her smile too practiced. I sank onto the couch, the locket digging into my palm. The condo smelled like him. Cedar, cologne, and ambition. I'd loved him for his fire, the way he'd talk about code like it was poetry, the way he'd pull me into a dance in this very room, laughing when I stepped on his toes. But now, every memory felt like a question. Why had he been on that winding cliffside road at midnight? Why had he given me this locket, his voice so urgent? I held it up to the light, its weight both anchor and omen. I wanted to open it, to rip apart his last wish, but I couldn't. Not yet. It was all I had left of him. The phone buzzed, snapping me out of the fog. A text from Claire. "Coffee tomorrow? I miss you." My thumb hovered over the screen. I wanted to believe her, to lean into the friendship that had carried me through a decade of late-night talks and shared secrets. But something in her voice at the memorial, something in Eleanor's words, gnawed at me. I typed back a single word, "Sure." Then I set the phone down, my heart a tangle of grief and suspicion. The locket glinted in my hand, whispering that there was more to this than I knew. The Seattle Police Department smelled like stale coffee and bureaucracy. I sat across from Detective Miller, a man with tired eyes and a mustache that looked like it had seen too many rainy days. He slid a clear plastic evidence bag across the desk, his voice gentle but clipped. "Your husband's effects, Mrs. Hayes. I'm sorry for your loss." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. The bag held Mark's shattered iPhone, its screen a spiderweb of cracks, and his leather wallet worn soft from years in his pocket. I reached for them, my hands steady from years of handling delicate artifacts, but then I saw it. A single, ornate brass key on a plain metal ring. It didn't belong. Mark's life was sleek, modern, keyless cars, smart locks, everything digital. This key was old, heavy, a skeleton key with intricate wards, the kind that opened century-old doors in the buildings I restored. Stamped on its small fob was a number, 1138. I turned it over, my preservationist's eye catching the wear patterns, shiny where fingers had gripped it, scratched where it had turned a lock. This wasn't a keepsake, It was used, functional, a secret hidden in plain sight. Any idea what it's for? I asked, my voice steady, despite the pulse hammering in my ears. Detective Miller shrugged. Could be anything. People keep odd things? Maybe a family heirloom? I didn't buy it. Mark wasn't sentimental about objects, he'd mocked my love for old bricks and rusted hinges. This key was deliberate, like the locket. I slipped it into my purse, the weight of it pulling at me as I left the station. Rain slicked the streets outside, Seattle's endless drizzle blurring the world. I walked to my car, the key burning a hole in my thoughts. It was a clue, a piece of Mark one didn't know, and that scared me more than the silence of the condo. Back home, I laid the key on the kitchen counter next to the locket. They sat there like artifacts from a life I'd thought I understood. I poured a glass of wine, my hands shaking now, and stared at them. The number 1138, was it a code, a locker, a safe? My mind spun, trying to fit this puzzle piece into the jagged hole of Mark's death. The police said it was an accident, but the key said otherwise. It whispered of secrets, of a man who'd left me a trail I wasn't sure I wanted to follow. But I had to. For him, for us. I picked up the locket, my fingers brushing the catch, but I stopped. Not yet. I wasn't ready to break his last promise. Claire's apartment was a shrine to her success. Glass walls, white furniture, a view of the Space Needle that screamed money. I'd helped her pick this place years ago, back when we'd stay up late dreaming about our futures, over cheap wine. Now, sitting on her couch, I felt like a stranger. She poured me coffee, her movements too graceful, her smile too perfect. "How are you holding up, Ava?" she asked, her voice syrupy with concern. I wanted to scream. Instead, I sipped the coffee, the bitterness matching the knot in my chest. "I'm here," I said, my voice flat. I didn't know how to talk to her anymore, not after the memorial, not after Eleanor's words. My purse sat between us, the brass key hidden inside, its weight a silent accusation. Then it happened. I reached for a tissue, my hands clumsy with exhaustion, and the key slipped out, clattering onto the glass coffee table. The sound was too loud, like a gunshot in the quiet room. Claire's eyes locked onto it, and for a split second, her face betrayed her, pure, raw panic, gone as fast as it came. She recovered, her smile sliding back into place, but I'd seen it, I knew. "What's that?" she asked, too casual. "You tell me," I said, my voice sharper than I meant. The air shifted, heavy with something unspoken. I leaned forward, the key between us like a challenge. "Claire, what aren't you telling me?" Her mask cracked. She stood, pacing to the window, her arms crossed tight. "God, Ava, you're making this harder than it needs to be." Her voice was low, venomous. "You want the truth? Fine. Mark and I, we were in love. Real love, not whatever you two had with your old buildings and your quiet little life. He needed someone who could keep up with him, who understood his world." The words hit like a fist, stealing my breath. I stared at her, my best friend, the woman who'd held my hand through every heartbreak, every triumph. "You're lying," I whispered, but my voice shook. "Am I?" She turned, her eyes cold. "He was going to leave you, Ava. He told me. You were a distraction, always buried in your dusty blueprints while he was building the future." I wanted to scream, to throw the coffee in her face, but then a small voice cut through the haze. "Mommy, where's Daddy?" A little girl ran in, blonde curls bouncing. Addie, Claire's daughter. My eyes flicked to the mantel, where a photo sat like a bomb. Mark, Claire, and Addie. Smiling like a perfect family, my stomach dropped. Claire knelt beside Addie, her voice soft but deliberate. "Go play, sweetheart." Then she looked at me, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "He was her father, Ava. DNA tests in my safe. The accident just sped things up." The room spun, I stumbled to my feet, the key forgotten on the table. My marriage, my friendship, my entire life, it was all a lie. I fled, the rain swallowing my tears as I ran to my car. Back in the condo, I collapsed on the floor, the locket in my hand, Claire's words echoing like a death knell. Mark had betrayed me. Claire had betrayed me. I was nothing, a footnote, erased. The locket burned against my skin, and in a surge of rage I pried it open, breaking his last wish. No picture inside, just a folded scrap of paper in his handwriting. "Seattle Legacy Vaults 1138. The foundation is everything." I froze. This wasn't a love token. It was a message, a lifeline. Mark hadn't left me for Claire. He'd left me the truth. The condo felt like a mausoleum, every sleek surface a reminder of a life that wasn't mine anymore. I sat on the floor, the locket's tiny note spread out before me, Mark's handwriting sharp against the dim light. Seattle Legacy Vaults, 1138. The foundation is everything. The words burned into me, not just a message, but a command. Mark had always said that phrase, about my work with old buildings, about his code. It was his way of saying the root of something held its truth. My hands shook, not with grief now, but with a cold, furious clarity. Claire's words had gutted me, but this note was a lifeline, proof that Mark hadn't abandoned me. He'd left me a path. I stood, my legs unsteady, and grabbed my laptop. Seattle Legacy Vaults was an old private deposit facility downtown, a fortress of pre-war brick and steel I'd studied in grad school. High security, discreet, the kind of place where secrets were buried. I tried to access Mark's Ethereum Dynamics account, hoping for clues, but my login was blocked. A curt email from their legal team popped up. Access restricted per acting CEO Claire Jensen. My blood boiled. Claire wasn't just stealing my past, she was locking me out of my future. The next morning I turned on the TV, a mistake. Eleanor Hayes was on a local news channel, her voice smooth as silk, praising Claire's visionary leadership at Ethereum. My son's legacy lives on in her, she said, her eyes glistening with practiced tears, and in his daughter Addie, my sole granddaughter. The camera panned to Claire, holding Addie's hand, both of them perfect in their grief. The narrative was clear. I was the bitter, childless widow, irrelevant. My phone stayed silent. No calls, no texts. Friends I'd known for years, people I'd thought were mine, had vanished, swayed by Eleanor's influence or Claire's charm. I was alone, erased. I wanted to scream, to smash the TV, but instead I clutched the brass key, its edges biting into my palm. I wasn't done yet. Mark had left me this, and I'd be damned if I let Claire and Eleanor rewrite him too. I pulled on my coat, the locket tucked into my pocket, and headed to Ethereum's headquarters. The glass tower loomed over downtown, a monument to Mark's ambition. The receptionist, a young woman with a nervous smile, wouldn't let me past the lobby. "Mrs. Hayes, I'm sorry, but Miss Jensen's orders." I left, humiliated, the eyes of the staff burning into my back. That night, a knock at the door startled me. It was Daniel, Mark's younger brother, his face pale under the hallway's fluorescent light. "Ava, I'm sorry," he said, his voice low. "I didn't know about Claire and everything." His eyes darted away, guilty. "Mother's got the board in her pocket and Claire's running the show. I can't do much, but I'm here." He handed me a coffee, the gesture small but warm. I wanted to trust him, but doubt gnawed at me. Was he an ally or another trap? I thanked him, my voice tight, and closed the door. Alone again, I stared at the note, the key, the locket. They were all I had left, and they were enough. I wasn't just a widow anymore. I was a woman with a purpose. The city felt like it was closing in, its gray skies and slick streets mirroring the walls around my life. Claire's legal barricades were ironclad, Ethereum's servers, Mark's emails, even our joint bank accounts were locked or drained. I had enough savings to keep the condo for a few months, but Eleanor's media campaign was relentless. Another interview aired, this one national, with Claire positioned as the grieving partner, Addie's mother, the rightful heir to Mark's legacy. Social media buzzed with sympathy for her, painting me as the unstable ex-wife clinging to a dead man's name. My preservationist colleagues stopped returning calls, their silence louder than any insult. I was a pariah. I spent days researching Seattle Legacy Vaults, my dining table a mess of blueprints and old city records. The building was a relic, its security state-of-the-art for the 1920s but layered with modern upgrades, cameras, keycard locks, guards. The brass leech in the key was my only way in, but I needed a plan. I wasn't a hacker like Mark or a manipulator like Claire. I was a preservationist, a woman who saw stories in worn stone and rusted iron. That was my strength. I called Daniel, my voice steady despite the paranoia clawing at me. "Can you get me into Ethereum's archives? Just for an hour?" He hesitated, his breath heavy over the phone. "Ava, it's risky. Claire's watching everyone." But he agreed to meet me at a cafe near Pike Place Market. He looked exhausted, his usual easy smile gone. "I found something," he whispered, sliding a USB drive across the table. Mark's old project notes before Claire joined. They mention a vault, but not why. I can't do more without Mother finding out. His eyes pleaded for trust, but I couldn't shake the fear that he was playing both sides. Back home, the USB revealed fragments, Mark's early code, emails about a patent, a vague reference to 1138, It wasn't enough, but it was fuel. I drove to the vault, parking a block away to watch the entrance. Guards rotated every 6 hours, cameras covered the main doors. I'd need a distraction, something subtle but effective. My preservationist's eye caught the building's old fire system, sprinkler valves in a side wing, accessible if you knew where to look. An idea formed, risky but possible. I spent the night sketching a plan, my hands steady for the first time in weeks. The grief was still there, a dull ache, but it was fuel now too. Claire thought she'd broken me. She was wrong. The air was damp, Seattle's drizzle clinging to my coat as I approached Seattle Legacy Vaults. The building was a fortress of red brick, its arched windows dark under the streetlights. I wore a hard hat and carried a clipboard, my cover as a historical surveyor assessing the building's pre-war architecture. I'd spent years talking my way into old structures. This was no different, except for the pulse pounding in my throat. The guard at the desk, a bored man in his 50s, glanced at my fake ID before waving me through. Step 1, done. Inside, the vault chamber was down a guarded corridor. I needed a distraction. In the east wing, I found the fire panel I'd studied in the blueprints. An old system poorly maintained. I accidentally nudged a valve, triggering a localized alarm. Sirens wailed, and the guards scrambled, ushering staff to the exits. I slipped into the vault corridor, my heart racing as I moved past rows of numbered boxes. 1138. There it was, a small steel door in the wall. The brass key slid in perfectly, the lock clicking with a satisfying thud. The box was heavy, its contents a shock. No love letters, no photos. Instead, I found a stack of documents, original patent filings for Ethereum's core tech, all in Mark's name. A forged partnership agreement giving Claire a majority stake, backdated to look legitimate. A later authentic contract showing Mark was buying her out, a per share fraction of what she'd claimed, and a USB drive labeled simply Ava. I pocketed it, my hands trembling when I heard footsteps. A guard, early. I shoved the documents into my bag, locked the box, and ducked behind a cabinet as he passed, my breath shallow. Back in my car, rain hammering the windshield, I plugged the USB into my laptop. Mark's voice filled the air, desperate, raw. Ava, if you're hearing this, I'm probably gone. Claire's blackmailing me. She forged the partnership papers, threatened to ruin us. I was going to the lawyer to expose her to fix this. I love you. I'm sorry. The recording cut off, dated the morning of his crash. My chest tightened, tears mixing with the rain on my face. This wasn't an accident. Claire had taken everything, my husband, my friend, my life. But now I had the truth, and I'd make her pay. The night of Ethereum's Innovators Gala was electric. Seattle's elite packed into a glittering ballroom overlooking the Puget Sound. I stood outside, rain beating on my black coat, the documents from the vault tucked into a slim folder under my arm. No morning dress tonight. I wore a tailored navy blazer and slacks, my hair pulled back, my face bare of tears. This wasn't about grief anymore, it was about justice. Mark's voice memo, copied onto a small USB drive, hung around my neck like the locket had. A new talisman. Daniel had come through, leaving his gala credentials in an envelope at my door with a note. Use them wisely. I'm sorry. I still wasn't sure if I trusted him, but I didn't need to. The truth was in my hands. Getting in was easier than I'd feared. Daniel's badge scanned without a hitch, the security guard barely glancing at me as I slipped past the velvet ropes. Inside, the ballroom was a sea of champagne flutes and tailored suits, the air thick with self-congratulation. Ethereum's logo glowed on a massive screen behind the stage, where Claire stood, radiant in a white gown, ready to be crowned the company's new visionary. The crowd applauded as she began her speech, her voice smooth, confident, painting herself as Mark's true partner, his legacy's heir. My stomach churned, but I kept moving. Weaving through the crowd toward the front row where Daniel sat with the board. I didn't shout or make a scene. That wasn't my style. I stopped beside Daniel, my heart pounding but my hands steady, and handed him the folder. Read it, I whispered. His eyes widened, but he nodded, passing it to the board chair, a stern woman named Lydia Chen. I stood back, watching their faces as they skimmed the documents, the original patents in Mark's name, the forged partnership agreement, the authentic contract exposing Claire's lies. Whispers spread among them, heads turning toward the stage. Claire faltered mid-sentence, her eyes catching the movement. I saw the moment she spotted me, her smile freezing, a flicker of fear breaking through her perfect mask. I didn't wait for her to recover. I walked to the sound booth at the side of the stage, where a confused tech was adjusting levels. "Play this," I said, handing him the USB. "Now." He hesitated, but something in my voice, calm, unyielding, made him comply. I stepped back as Mark's voice filled the ballroom, raw and desperate, echoing off the glass walls. "Ava, if you're hearing this, I'm probably gone. Claire's blackmailing me. She forged the partnership papers, threatened to ruin us. I was going to the lawyer to expose her, to fix this. I love you, I'm sorry." The room went silent. 1,000 eyes on Claire. She stood frozen on stage, her face pale, her hands gripping the podium like it was the only thing keeping her upright. The board members were on their feet now. Lydia Chen holding the forged contract, like a weapon. Murmurs turned to gasps, then to shouts. Reporters in the back scrambled for their phones, the story already writing itself. Claire tried to speak, her voice cracking. "This is a misunderstanding," she stammered, but no one was listening. Her empire was crumbling and I was the one holding the hammer. I didn't stay to watch her fall. I walked out. The rain cool against my face, Mark's voice still ringing in my ears. For the first time in weeks I felt light. Like I could breathe again. Claire's lies were exposed and Mark's truth was free. But I wasn't done yet. There was one more person who needed to face me. The aftermath was chaos, but I didn't stick around to watch it unfold. The news cycle exploded with headlines: Ethereum CEO caught in fraud scandal, widow uncovers late husband's true legacy. I stayed offline, letting the world tear Claire apart. I didn't need to see it. The documents were with the board, and Daniel, finally stepping out of his mother's shadow, was pushing for an investigation. Ethereum wasn't my fight. Mark had built it, not me, but I made sure his name was restored. The patents were re-registered in his name, and a new leadership board, led by Lydia Chen, took over. I negotiated a settlement, enough to secure my future, and donated a chunk to a charity for single mothers in Addie's name. It wasn't about revenge, it was about balance. Eleanor was the last piece. I drove to her sprawling estate in Capitol Hill, the kind of place that screamed old money, manicured lawns, ivy-covered stone. She met me in her study, her silver hair as perfect as ever, but her eyes were wary, her poise fraying. "What do you want, Ava?" she asked, her voice cold. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "You chose Claire over me," I said, standing in the doorway, the locket in my pocket. "You let her lie, let her erase me. But Mark loved me, Eleanor, not her, and you were too blind to see how she played you." I set a copy of the forged contract on her desk, along with a photo from the vault, a candid of Mark and me, laughing at a preservation site, one he'd kept safe from me. "He was my husband, and you'll live with knowing you betrayed him too." Her face crumpled just for a moment before she straightened. "Get out," she whispered. I did, leaving her with the truth and nothing else. It wasn't anger driving me anymore, it was pity. She'd lost her son, and now she'd lost her illusions. A year later, I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, a small, sunlit space in a historic brick building I'd helped restore. The Puget Sound stretched out below, golden in the sunset. I'd sold the condo, its ghosts too heavy to carry. My new home was mine, designed with my hands, exposed brick, warm wood, a space that felt like me. A tabby cat key, brushed against my leg, purring softly. I smiled, scratching her ears. The locket sat on a shelf inside, unopened now, a reminder of the truth I'd fought for. I wasn't the same Ava. The grief, the betrayal, the fight, they'd carved me into something stronger, not harder. I was back at work, saving old buildings, finding stories in their bones. My phone buzzed with texts from new friends, people who saw me, not Eleanor's narrative or Claire's lies. The silence in my life was gone, replaced by a quiet that felt like peace. I looked out at the water, the horizon endless, and for the first time I didn't feel like I was running from something. I was running toward it. Myself, my future, a life I'd built on my own foundation. And it was enough. This story shows that strength isn't about not feeling pain, it's about what you do with it. Ava transformed her grief and betrayal into fuel for justice. She didn't let herself become the bitter widow they wanted her to be. Instead, she became the architect of her own rescue. If you're going through a dark time, remember that your greatest power can be forged in your deepest wounds. How do you find strength in difficult times? Share your experience in the comments because, like an old building, we are all stronger for the history we've survived.